Once the original and proposed surfaces have been created, the Subsite Manager routine allows the user to identify multiple areas with different pregrade depths, which will facilitate the earthworks calculations for the project based on each individual area. We have two surfaces in the drawing that we're going to work with. We have a grading surface and a original ground surface. The grading surface is represented in the drawing with the triangles only style. We'll just show that style and then turn it to a border only display. Within the drawing, you can see that we have a collection of 2D polylines that we've used to designate the areas to be calculated. So having those two surfaces, the grading surface and the original ground surface, and the individual areas identified with the 2D polylines, we can use the Subsite Manager routine from the Grading Tools panel, and we'll select that, which will activate the Subsite Manager. We'll just clear this so we can have a clean start at this grading volume calculation. In this dialog box, we have some default values set where we can specify the depth of topsoil within the areas. We can also set a pregrade depth default. This value is minus 0.65 meters. We can select the areas by layer, in which case we would simply set the layer to use and the subsites would be collected and displayed in the lower section. Or we can select them individually from the drawing. And let's look at that method for this exercise. So we'll select the Select from Drawing option. We will choose the Select Subsites button, and we are now in the drawing. We can select the 2D polylines that represent the areas that we wish to calculate. So we'll pick that first area, and then which represents the street C, the roadway. That's the first area. Then we'll select one of the interior areas, which is on the north side of the subdivision, that little 2D line, and then we'll pick another one that represents the southern section of that internal area. We'll click enter, and now we can see that those areas have been transferred into the Subsite Editor section. As we mentioned, the first item we selected was the roadway, so we'll just call this Street C. And the second area is going to be called Subbase Area 2, and we have Subbase Area 3. Again, we could rename those to clarify which areas that we're working in. Now that we've got the name straightened out, we can see that we've got the subsite area shown in square meters. We have the topsoil depth, which can be customized for each individual area if the geotechnical report shows different depths of topsoil. We'll leave these at 0.3 or a foot. And then we can preset some pregrade areas, which will lower that area, that pregrade depth amount, below the finished surface that has been used for design. So in this case, Street C is going to be 0.5 meter pregrade. Areas that are internal, that are the houses, will have a pregrade on the first section of 0.55, and then the second section would be a little bit deeper pregrade, so we'll call this 0.75. So now that we've got those preset, we can save this to a ASC type file. So once we click on the Save the Subsite list, we will select that, and that subsite list has been saved. If you want to save it with a different name, we click Save As, and you can see that the path is set to the directory where the drawing is, and from this file name we can place in the updated name for the Subsite Manager selection set. We'll close that dialog box. Now to proceed with the calculation, we'll look at a Prismodal Volumes calculation method. We'll select the Prismodal Volumes. That will open up the dialog box, and we'll set the first surface, which will be our original ground surface, OG. We'll select our second surface, which is our grading surface. We will generate a report, a text file that we can take a look at with the results of the volume calculations. We can draft that table and put it in an AutoCAD table right in the drawing. We can create a differential surface, and we can give that any name that you wish. In our case, it's going to be called Many Area. We can create a surface of that in that new stripped area. We can create a pregrade surface, and we'll call that one pregrade. There's an option to select engineered fill depth, which will calculate a volume for each subsite where the fill exceeds a specific depth. So this volume is calculated between the stripped and the pregrade surface. The file that we're going to use for the calculations is from that Subsite Manager that we just ran. We'll select that file, we'll say OK, and we'll click OK to move to the dialog box that allows us to enter a bulking or factors for cut or fill. We'll say OK to that, and the calculation will proceed. We have a feature line style that can be applied for the feature line that represents the pregrade depth line. And as the system calculates the volumes for each individual area that's been selected, we get some information displayed in the panorama. And now we can see that the other surfaces are being constructed as we requested in the Prismodal section. We'll get the many-volume.rep notepad report, which gives us the individual areas, their total area, total topsoil that's being removed, the total cut per individual area, the information on the pregrade, any areas of engineered fill, and obviously the net volume for the total earthworks calculation. We'll close that panel, we'll close the panorama, and we'll place the table in the drawing at a selected location. We'll take a look in the main portion of the plan view, and we can see that we have a mtext report at each specific area that we have identified with the 2D polyline, giving all the information for the areas as they relate to the cut and fill. In the surfaces section, we now have our many area surface created and our pregrade surface and our strip surface. Should you want to adjust any of the pregrade values, simply go back to the Subsite Manager, activate that dialog box, adjust the pregrade depth or the topsoil depth, do a save as, give it a new name, and rerun the volumes to get the adjusted values.